Hello, how are you this evening? Good, I hope. So, I thought, it being the silly season, it would be fun to talk about Rudolph, the red-nosed reindeer. Now, the facts behind Rudolph, I think are actually pretty interesting, and actually a little heartwarming on some level. Maybe even more heartwarming than the poem in its original iteration itself. It's really kind of an interesting story. Now, a lot of folks believe, that Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer is sort of a tale as old as time, right? It's been around forever. It's eternal. Well, it's not. It's only 85 years old, which isn't young, but hell, Jack Nicholson is 87. Clint Eastwood's in his 90s, I think 94. Dick Van Dyke, Dick from the Dick Van Dyke Show and Mary Poppins, he's 98 years old. Ian McKellen, he's 85. Francis Ford Coppola is 85. Lee Majors, the $6 million man, is 85 years old. Hell, President Biden is 82, and I think President Trump is 78 or 79. So Rudolph, isn't as ancient as everyone thinks. Anyway, I digress. Our story begins in 1939. We'll say the spring of 39 for convenience. At the Chicago-based catalog and department store company known as Montgomery Ward. Now, Montgomery Ward was in business from 1872 to 2000, so about 128 years. And for those of you who aren't familiar, think of it like a super Target or a super Walmart. When I was a boy, Montgomery Ward competed with the likes of Sears and Roebuck, really just known as Sears at that point, J.C. Penney. A few years later, for those of you that know, Gemco, Fedco, Best, Treasury. At any rate, just a giant department store and a catalog store. In fact, here, take a look at this. This was actually my father's credit card from Montgomery Ward, obviously fairly old. He actually purchased, and I have it today, a rolling toolbox from Montgomery Ward. It was his very first one and ultimately my very first one, and I've got his credit card. Kind of cool. Anyway, where was I? 1939. Now, every year at Christmas, Montgomery Ward would send out a free coloring book to its customers for their children. And I would imagine for many years, they basically sent out the same coloring book that I'm sure they purchased in bulk from a third-party supplier. Well, in 1939, Monkey Wards, as it was often called, decided to do something special. Now, I know what you're going to ask. Why do they call it Monkey Wards? Well, no one really knows for sure, but some have offered an explanation that at one point Montgomery Ward actually offered exotic monkeys in some of their stores and maybe even in the catalog. And that's sort of where the name comes from, which makes me think years and years ago, my parents actually owned a monkey. I wonder if they got it at Montgomery Ward. I gotta ask my mother. You know what? I don't even care if they did or not. That's part of the story now. My parents bought their monkey at Montgomery Ward. And I'll have to tell you some stories of how this monkey tormented my father for however long they had it. The stories are great. But anyway, I digress. So anyway, Montgomery Ward wanted to do something special in 1939. So they tapped their in-house advertising copywriter, this guy named Robert L. May. Now, Bobby, we'll just say Mr. May. Robert L. May, he's a 35-year-old Jewish guy, born and raised in New York City, and asked him to create a nice original children's story. Very cute, et cetera, for Christmas. Now, the only parameters that Montgomery Ward gave Mr. May was it had to be developed around an animal similar to Disney's Ferdinand the Bull, which had come out about the same time. Obviously, they wanted to be, we'll say, a cherished sort of character. Now, oddly enough, this was a pretty tough time for Mr. May. His first wife was slowly dying of cancer, and he, of course, was struggling to pay for her treatments, as well as just keep up with life's other bills. Even in 1939, some things never changed, just like today, right? Just trying to get by. But for Mr. May, I think it certainly beat writing about white button-up shirts every day, right? Anyway, so May started work on what became a poem, more poem than story originally, and decided on a reindeer. And they say the reindeer is mostly because obviously an established Christmas animal, and I guess his daughter Barbara at that time was very, very into reindeers. So he gets to work on developing the story. Now May, in the later years, often reflected on some of his influences were the story of the ugly duckling, and apparently he was tormented in grade school by the bullies because he was just incredibly shy and awkward. And this helped influence the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer story. Some of the original first names were Rollo or Reginald, but obviously, as we know, they settled on Rudolph. Well, one day while he's sitting in his office in Chicago, working on the story, I guess a thick fog had kind of rolled into Lake Michigan and into Chicago proper. And while he's sitting in his office looking out the window, he sees the fog rolling in, and the genesis of the idea of the red nose to light the way through the fog came to be because of some Chicago fog. Now, the red nose on the reindeer initially did not amuse the suits at Montgomery Ward. I think at that time, red noses were often associated with drunks. If you drink a lot of gin, you get that red nose. So what May did is he asked the illustrator that was assigned the task for this story, a cat named Denver Gillen, to try to draw the reindeer, make him a little cuter and a little bit more energetic. Now, I don't know how you do that on paper, how you just make energy, but Denver did, and whatever he did convinced the suits that the red nose would be fine. Now, this poem was basically written in the same pacing or meter, if you will, as A Visit from St. Nicholas, which is known to all of us as the night before Christmas, right? The night before Christmas, and all through the house, not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. You got it. Now, as May tells the story, it took him about 50 hours in total to craft that poem, in between, his normal copyright duties of writing about, button-up shirts and overalls. Now, the poem was published as a paperback book in time for Christmas of 1939. So here, take a look. Here's a picture first of Mr. May. We should, give him his due. Here's a picture of Mr. May and his creation, followed by a picture of the original paperback book that Monkey Wards sent out to its customers. Take a look. Right? Kind of interesting. Now, 2.4 million copies in 1939 were sent to Montgomery Ward customers all over the country. Huge success. Absolutely phenomenal success. Instant hit. Now, Montgomery Ward sent the book out again in 1946. This time it was 3.6 million copies, which tells us we went from, what did I say before? We sent out 2.4 million. This time we sent out 3.6. So within 10 years, 8 years, they increased their customer based by over 1 million people. 3.6 million copies were sent out. You can buy them on eBay. They're too expensive for me to buy because I looked. I'm like, well, anyway. Now, the part that's sort of weird is you have to keep in mind that Robert May was a salaried employee of Montgomery Ward. So he didn't receive any additional compensation. Zero compensation for this creation, for this work. He did not own Rudolph. Montgomery Ward did. Now, you go along through your life. In 1946, because the popularity year over year continues to grow, in 1946, RCA Victor approached May about recording a spoken word version of his poem. Put it on a record for you younger kids. A record. Poppies. Since May didn't own it, he couldn't say yes or no because Montgomery Ward owns it. This is when the Christmas miracle happens for this young Jewish man from New York. Sewell Avery, who was at that time the president of Montgomery Ward, gave Robert May the rights to his creation. Just said, you know what? You can have the rights. Free and clear. Here, pal. You create it, run with it. Which would never happen today. The bastards that run corporations today would never, ever do that. So hats off to Mr. Avery for just saying, you know what? Run with it, brother. So January the 1st, 1947, Robert May became the rightful owner of his creation, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, which is pretty amazing. Now, May would go on, of course, to make a for sale version of the book, and he released several copies. Here's a picture of one from 1967, which I may buy on the eBay just to have. We're getting closer to my age. But here, take a look. Here's a picture of the book. You'll notice it's sort of bound differently than the 1939 version. We've some progress. But anyway, take a look. Right? I know you'll be shocked by this, but he made a recording with RCA Victor in 1947, plus some toys, plus a puzzle book, plus kids' slippers, and anything else you could possibly think on. If you could slap Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer just like today on it, that's what Mr. May did. Now, in 1948, this cat named Johnny Marks, who I believe wrote Jingle Bell Rock, but anyway, so Johnny Marks wrote a musical adaptation of Mr. May's poem at the behest of Mr. May. He didn't just do this randomly. And I think that's what most of us, at least Gen Xers, quite frankly, most boomers, and everybody after, think of when you say Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. It's that, oh, there we go. I must be slipping. Think of when we hear Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer had a very shiny nose, and if you ever saw it. That wasn't the poem in 1939. This is 1948. He writes the song. So Mr. May took the song to the likes of Bing Crosby, Dinah Shore, Perry Como, hoping that they would record the song. All of them turned it down. Then Mr. May went to a country singer, this cat named Gene Autry. Now, Gene wasn't too hip on the song, but his old lady, Ina, was. Ina liked it. Now, Gene, being a man's man, guys know, happy wife, happy life, right? So Gene recorded it. Well, as you know, boom, huge. Gene Autry thought he was famous, then he recorded it, now he's Gene Autry. And today, quite frankly, it's a Christmas standard. Gene Autry's song, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. In fact, it's the second most popular Christmas song in this country, second only to White Christmas. Right? How unbelievable is that? the part that I find amusing is it was eventually covered by those two hoople heads, Como and Crosby. Those two cats ended up covering it and missed out on a fortune. Good bastards. Anyway, by 1950, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was an icon, a legend, like Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol. Right? It was in the ether at that point. Now, in 1951, Mr. May left Monkey Ward. I don't know why they're Monkey Wards. Why did it become plural? Isn't that interesting? The term Monkey Wards. For those of you who don't know, but anyway, Montgomery Ward in 1951, May left to focus on the Rudolph business full time. In 1958, he went back to Montgomery Ward. I think the saturation point, honestly, had hit, and I'm sure there's some tax. You have to remember that in the 50s, the super wealthy paid way more than they pay today. I don't want to get into taxes, but their tax bracket, once you started getting into the multi-millions, you started paying a lot. Anyway, in 1958, he returned to Montgomery Ward, back to his copyright duties, until he retired in 1970. And thanks to the Rankin Bass stop motion cartoon of 1964, we've all seen it. Here's sort of a picture to remind you, but you've seen it. Right? That's the stuff that makes Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer Christmas canon, and why we think Rudolph is eternal and been around forever. Now, two sad things. I don't want to leave on a sad note, but Mr. May's first wife didn't survive cancer. She died before the book even came out in 1939, and Mr. May, he died in 1976. But what an amazing sort of story with Montgomery Ward, Mr. May, and creating something just out of thin air that, again, it's part of the ether now. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. You can't think of Santa and his sleigh without Rudolph. And it only came about in 1939, 1940, right before the World War II. Anyway, I thought it was very, very interesting, and I wanted to share. You know what? Here, I don't even know if I showed you. Here's the book. Oh, I did. I already showed you a picture of the book from 1967. You've seen it, so I won't show it to you again. Too much of this. Fortunately, I drink bourbon, so the odds of my nose going red are slim. Odds of my liver going black, like a lump of coal, pretty high. Anyway, in this world, when you can be anything you want, you be kind, be humble. What's that? Skeleton Crew? Okay, 2 seconds on the Skeleton Crew. Might be the best Disney Plus Star Wars show since Andor. It's really good. If you have Disney Plus, check it out. Now understand, it's for kids. It's kind of a Goonies meets Star Wars meets Stranger Things. It's capturing this nostalgia of the 80s, which is important, at least to me. It's fun again. There's no anger, there's no message. It's just some kids that get sort of lost in space, if you will, and they go on this great adventure. There's only been 2 episodes, at least at the recording of this, and I won't tell you where I got the hat, but I got one. It's from the crew. Anyway, take a look at it. It really is fun. Just keep in mind, it's for kids. It's not for 55-year-olds. Anyway, in this world, you can be anything you want. I digress. You be kind, you be humble, you be forgiving, and I'll think about telling some stories about my old man and that monkey named Julius, him going to register at El Camino Community College and what he did with that monkey. I might do a, some will be true, maybe some will be made up. Who cares, right? As long as they're good stories. Anyway, take care. We'll see you next time. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and we'll talk at you later. Bye.